Concerningly high levels of COVID, a risk of a new wave of infections at Christmas, a health service under increasing pressure and the prospect of new coronavirus restrictions being brought in. All contributing to what the Deputy First Minister told MSPs was a precarious and unpredictable stage in the pandemic. Well, let's talk to the Deputy First Minister now. John Swinney is with us. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You indicated yesterday in Parliament that COVID certification could be required for entry to more hospitality and leisure venues. Which ones are you thinking about?
What we're doing is signalling the fact that given the situation around the pandemic and the serious situation that we currently face and are likely to face for the foreseeable future over winter, we have to be ready to take additional measures. And what I was flagging up to Parliament yesterday was the openness of the government about the fact that we will have to consider further options to put in place greater measures to provide protection. I'm not signalling that we're going to do that. I'm simply saying that we're considering it. It's about being open with Parliament and with the public. And I indicated yesterday that we were looking to potentially extend the certification scheme to look at some of the wider hospitality settings.
Which ones would they be? Would it be cafes, cinemas, gyms, leisure centres? Because, you're going to announce this next Tuesday, so you would have thought you might have made a decision on a few of these.
Well, we've not made any decisions, Laura, and the reason why we've not made any decisions is that government has got to be satisfied that any decisions that it takes are proportionate in the context of the state of the pandemic. That's the legal test that we are obliged to follow, and we take that very seriously. So the government is going through a process of considering what it needs to do in the context of the current prevalence of the virus. So it's not a case that we've taken a decision and we've not announced it. We have taken no decisions. We are airing the fact that we've got a significant challenge. We need to engage with the business community and engage with sectors about how we best address that, which we have done throughout the pandemic, and we will take decisions in the light of that consultation and in the light of the prevalence of the pandemic at that stage.
We've seen from the reaction of businesses and opposition parties that actually trailing ahead to next Tuesday's announcement and what might or might not happen has actually just created an awful lot of uncertainty for more people. Why not just tell them exactly what you're planning to do?
Well, because we've got to go through a process of assessing whether there is a proportionate basis for taking these steps. Now, we are facing a serious threat. We have got cases that are regularly at about 2,500 per day in Scotland. We've got hospitals that are under increasing pressure as a consequence of COVID and the understandable, necessary desire to catch up on the treatments that have been delayed because of the pandemic.
But actual hospital COVID admissions are down 20% on last week.
Well, they are, but what I'm saying to you is that our hospitals are under enormous pressure because of the pressure of COVID, the catch-up programme, and we're also about to go into winter, and we know that the health service faces its greatest challenges over winter. So the government has a duty to look at the situation today and to look at the situation that we are likely to face over the course of the next few months. And we all know that winter is a very challenging period. That was accepted across the board within Parliament yesterday. The challenge is to make sure that we have the right measures in place to tackle that situation as it presents itself.
Is extending the COVID certification scheme the right way to prevent it spreading, given that you yourself told the Holyrood COVID Committee that you didn't have the data to say that these passports were reducing infections in the settings that are already being used?
I think this is where I have a real concern about the way in which the explanations that ministers give to parliamentary committees are contorted by members of the opposition. Because the point that I made to the committee last Thursday is that I cannot, in all honesty, establish a direct line between COVID certification and a particular outcome. But what I think it is reasonable to do is to look at the basket of measures that we have in place to see if that is having an effect. And if I just go back to the question you've just asked me a moment ago, we have a range of measures in place just now, and we are seeing suppression of hospital admissions. We are not seeing suppression of cases, but we're seeing suppression of hospital admissions, which gives me some confidence that some of the measures that we are taking are being effective. I cannot, however, say to you, it is all because of COVID certification, because that would be misleading on my part. But equally, it's misleading for my opponents to contort the words that I've given to a parliamentary committee.
But can you
which
understand
is what you just
then?
heard before 8 o'clock.
Can you understand then, though, for in terms of the hospitality industry, they've described the vaccine passports as catastrophic for them. Can you understand their concerns if there's no proof that transmission is happening in their settings and there's no proof that the current vaccination passport scheme works, that then you might extend this to the other parts of their business?
Well, there are 2 points to make there. The first is that the core purpose of applying the vaccine certification scheme in the first place was to increase take-up of the vaccine. And
Has
the
it
evidence
done that?
Yes, it has. In September, there were 53% of 18 to 29-year-olds were vaccinated. By the 1st of November, that had risen to 68%. That's an increase of of nearly a third. Now, that's a significant impact of the COVID certification scheme, in my opinion. The second point to make is that we know that some of the nightclub sector, where we've applied the COVID certification scheme, is a higher risk setting for the risk of transmission. So what we're trying to do is to make that as safe as possible to enable it to carry on and to operate, because the alternative would be for that sector to have to close, and we don't want that to be the case.
Will you then extend the passports to include proof of a negative test or proof of recent infection with COVID, so that those who can't get the vaccine can still get in?
That's one of the issues that we are actively considering just now.
Murdo Fraser says you've been talking about that for a couple of months. Will you actually do it?
Well, again, it's another of the contortions of Murdo Fraser's arguments. We didn't do it in the first place because the purpose of applying the vaccine certification scheme was to drive up vaccine certification levels. If we're going to apply this in a more widespread level, then there is a stronger case for using a negative LFD test to gain entry. And of course, all the huff and puff that you've heard from Murdo Fraser before 8 o'clock about this scheme evaporated when you said to him, well, if there was an LFD test put in place, would that make the scheme all okay? And apparently that makes it all okay. So I think
it's what other governments across Europe and indeed in the Welsh government are doing. It's how they're operating their system.
All I'm arguing for is a bit of cool, rational consideration of what's a really difficult situation. And that's what I'm trying to give to this. It would help if the opposition could engage with it. Yesterday, we had commendation from the leader of the Conservative Party that the vaccination booster programme is rolling out really well, and we passed the moment yesterday where 1 million booster jags have been given within Scotland. So the leader of the Conservative Party yesterday was saying that was a really good achievement, and then we've got Murdo Fraser on the radio this morning saying that what we've got to do is to make sure the booster programme is going well. Well, the leader told us yesterday it was going well.
Just on vaccinations, the UK Government's Health Secretary announced yesterday it will be compulsory for NHS staff in England to be fully vaccinated against COVID by next spring. Are you considering introducing similar measures here?
We're not. We encourage health and social care staff to undertake to be double vaccinated and to secure the booster jab when that's available. There is a very, very high take-up amongst health and social care staff in that respect, but we do not intend to follow the mandatory course that the UK government are following.
Deputy First Minister John Swinney, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Now, some of these issues are going to be discussed with Kay from 9. Good morning.
Good morning. That's interesting, though, that John Swinney just saying that about the mandatory vaccines, because it is a sector that has a high turnover of staff. So if you look 6 months down the line or a year down the line, you know, would it be a condition of employment or would it never be a condition of employment in Scotland? You know, that's something we would need to consider. But we are focusing on his comments both yesterday and today in that interview that they have to look at potentially tougher restrictions, extension of the vaccine passport scheme, increased mask use. I don't know if anything else was mentioned in there specifically, was it?
Ventilation was one of the things that he mentioned yesterday as well, just potentially as, you know.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, how do you enforce that? How do you make sure that everyone's got their windows open? You know, I mean, clearly it's a good suggestion, but quite a difficult thing to police, I imagine.